So would you say newsrooms need to be hiring software engineers or AI grads to pull off these, fancy AI things?
To some extent, definitely. I think that since this is a big shift, I think it's going to affect a lot on how we recruit and what skills or capabilities or even personalities that we need in the newsroom. So maybe a few years ago, you would hire someone because he or she was very fast at writing, like great for, breaking news. Maybe that's not a skill that you need that much anymore. Maybe you need something again that, has this really special tone of voice, someone that's really good, have a lot of soft skills, can build trust, can build connections. That could be the same person, but it's not, it could be, but maybe not. So I think it's going to affect us. But then, of course, I think we do need more, tech savvy people from the management team and down, so to speak. Definitely.
Hello and welcome to Fix Ed, the podcast, The Fix Media, where we unpack media insights, strategy, and innovation. I'm Christoph Schwaiger, and I will be your host for today. And before we dive in, please subscribe and follow to The Fix online. Today, I'm being joined by Martin Schori, the former head of AI and innovation of the Swedish newspaper Aftonbladet, who recently co-founded a media company, Hint, who is now also the author of a new book, AI in the Newsroom, published in Swedish and in English. And this book will be today's topic of conversation. Martin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I'll start the interview by giving you a disclaimer that the final question will actually be two questions. I asked ChatGPT to come up with the hardest possible question it could for you, and I tried to do the same, and I'm curious to see which one you'll find most challenging. But before we get to that final question, I'll actually start with the question you yourself asked someone in your book. If you had to design an AI tool specifically for journalists, what would it do?
Well, that's depends on what you're trying to achieve, I guess. But I would say a really good beat assistant that will give you all the stuff that you need to know in order to cover your specific beat that day.
Sounds really helpful. In your book, you open it by describing yourself as someone who isn't really the biggest fan of AI. So in your book, AI in the Newsroom, sort of like what you think journalists should be learning about this topic?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I guess in a pretty near future, AI will not necessarily be a skill or a competence, because it's going to be so integrated in everything we do. But at least for now, I do think it's still something that you need to get involved with and learn. So it's definitely... it's not too late as of now, but I think that it's still a skill that you need to know as a journalist, definitely.
One of the people you interviewed said if they are learning these skills, one of the risks is that journalists spend too much time sort of like adapting their current workflows using AI and not enough time to sort of like re-envision new workflows which would actually matter. So if hypothetically a national news outlet were to call you today and ask you for help to build out a new agentic AI workflow for them, which would be the first workflow you would help them build out?
Well, again, I think it's a bit tricky sometimes to talk about, AI in journalism in general, and particular, news outlets. It's again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're a news outlet that kind of wants, that has a pretty broad target audience, that are cover, a bit of everything in a specific, business or city or whatever it is, then it will probably be what I was talking about before, like some kind of a monitor that would kind of connect the content discovery with production in order to create like this really fast, hopefully also a modern and with a good UX that serves the news in the way that the audience wants it, basically. But that's if you want to go that way. Then there are obviously other ways of presenting journalism, of doing journalism, of if you want, now we talk a lot about community journalism, for example, then that's not the way to go. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
So you say there are more potentials in sort of like sourcing, doing the grunt work of journalism to produce the story, or is AI offering more potentials in packaging it? Like, what gets you most excited about these different directions?
Yeah, and and again, I think that what we kind of probably need to start here is to define what we're doing, and I think that other people like Nikita Roy has done a pretty good job of describing this. Like, if you media should probably be in one of the extreme, like either it's this very fast commodity news, modern user experience. You could liquid content that will give you a fast and smart overview of the news today, or they should be on the other extreme, which would be a more human-centered journalism, community journalism, where you really you create these relationships and you connect with your audience. The problem today is that many newsrooms are somewhere in the middle, and I would argue that it's not sustainable to be that in the long run. It will probably, you would have to choose. So I think there's, AI has potential in many levels, and especially if you choose like the first extreme with the more the commodity news, the fast one, then it has a lot of potential, and it could probably be very helpful in basically every step you're taking.
In your book, AI in the Newsroom, you say that we should do journalism that cannot be summarized in 3 points, which is kind of a bit hard since that's what we've always been trained to do, right? Like, just give people the most important information, sort of like inverted pyramid style. People don't have time. So it might require a bit of like different thinking. So as the AI transition happens around journalists, what kind of transition should be happening in the journalistic mindset?
Well, yes. So that is an argument that I make, and when we see that these tech companies and AI models, they are taking our content and they're repackaging it, sometimes in a better way than we are doing it, and if that happens, there's probably legal stuff we need to sort out. But if it happens and that's the end of our products and brands, then I don't think that we had that sustainable brands in the first place. And maybe it's even maybe it's even a good, somewhat good, that now we are forced to ask ourselves these questions that we maybe should have asked ourselves many years ago. Like, what's our value in a digital world? What's our value in an AI mediated world? And so that's it. It forced us to ask these questions, and it's really interesting and a bit exciting, I think. But again, I think that if you want to do journalism that's not easily summarized in 3 bullet points, then you have to either add perspectives, add a personal tone of voice, add someone in your newsroom that really has this ability to connect with the audience and build trust.
As someone who covers AI, I myself find that I'm so like taking a break from the news for one day and you're suddenly out of the loop with the latest version of OpenGlow or ChatGPT, and there's some kind of new whole AI workflow which I haven't heard of. So it's really hard. I find it's really hard to keep up. From when you published your book and sent it to the printing press until now, have there been any new AI developments in the news world which have gotten you excited, which you would have otherwise included in the book?
I'm sure there's been a lot, as you were describing, and that was I was a bit hesitant to even write this book because it's as you say, the development goes very fast. I couldn't write these sort of 10 best tools for a journalist, because they would they would not exist when the book is out. So I try to do it to focus more like on the principles and how is this going to affect us, and also like how you get started with AI. Basically, it's a practitioner's guide. But more in a broader sense than specific, chatbots or even, models. Yeah, but I think if I was to answer, it would probably, this whole like real Claude Code and agentic opportunities was something that I could, if I would have wrote it today, I would probably have included more. But again, I try to do it as timeless as possible. So hopefully it's in there a little bit, but it could maybe have been more. Yes.
Indeed, the conversation in the AI world has now shifted into sort of agent loops, AI agents, with some people sort of like showing literal hierarchical structures of like how they have AI CEOs managing their own AI sub agents. So, without scaring everyone who's listening to you right now, should editors and journalists be adapting this sort of like tech working methodologies in the tech world to journalism, or should we like be cautious about it?
Well, I think that we definitely have to follow what's going on. As you say, it can be a bit overwhelming, and everybody does not have to read all the AI news every day. But to have like the broader picture, I think it's essential. I think it's impossible to have maybe a top management team of a news corporation or a news media that has not this competence or interest even in how these new technology affect us, and how the world around us is changing. So I think that you definitely need to be on top of that game, and that's also nothing. If you're a leader, for example, I don't think that's something that you could outsource to your AI initiative, whenever you want to call it, like a hub or task force or a team. So we definitely need to be on top of this, I think.
All right, Martin, before I go to part two, I wanted us to do a bit of a quick fire round. So I'll give out some statements, not really questions. And I'd like to see if you could answer sort of not yes or no, maybe like one or two sentences, what comes your mind when I say these statements. Sounds good?
Yep.
All right. So Claude versus ChatGPT.
I switched a couple of months ago to Claude, and I'm not regretting that.
All right, I hear that a lot. I'm still not 100% convinced, but you're adding to the pro Claude side. All right. Adding AI generated images in news stories.
Probably not. I don't think that's a way forward, and it's just I don't think that there's a demand for that either from the audience.
Okay. So hyper personalized news means journalists need to be creating more content.
Probably. Or journalists with the help of robots. But yes, I think that if you're if you want to cater to a lot of people, but at the same time be like you have a broad, this like national newspaper, for example, and want to have that a personalized experience, then you probably need a lot of content. Yes.
Understandable. Do newsrooms need an AI policy?
Yeah, sure, definitely. You should have one by now.
Wouldn't it run the same risk of your your book, that it gets outdated immediately, sort of like when a new tool comes up and journalists start asking questions?
Well, I think you could have one with principles, but obviously it needs to be updated quite often, and it should be like a living document, definitely.
Okay. And last one, AI will make journalists more relevant.
Yeah, if we play our cards right, I think that's a huge possibility, because you can already see that people are tired of AI slop and AI generated content that fills our feed. So yes.
If we play our cards right, love that. I see we handled the Facebook transition really well as media industry, so I may be a little bit less optimistic than you are, but great to have this contrast. Jumping back to your book, AI in the Newsroom, you're reading your book, it sometimes felt like a race in that you describe something newsrooms can do with AI, but then you also hinted it, and I'm like thinking immediately after, but then our readers can also do this with a ChatGPT prompt, like a normal one. So is chasing AI tools an actual defensible strategy for newsrooms?
Well, I think so. I mean, I do think so, and it goes a little bit back to the question what I was talking about, like what you're trying to achieve. But if I don't think it's sustainable, or to we did a lot of processes in journalism manually, because we didn't have a choice, and now there are tools to help us out, and in some cases even doing it better than us. So I think staying doing that manually is probably not sustainable in this new world. And we should ask ourselves like what can we do to bring even more value, to become essential for our audience. And that's not a very easy question, obviously. But I think that you could use AI and new technology in order to answer that. But the answer might not be develop a lot of AI tools. Maybe the end game is something else here, and that's more human-centered journalism. But if you want to do that, you probably need help from AI.
You mentioned that some people, perhaps outside of the journalism world, might be doing certain things better than we are. So would you say newsrooms need to be hiring software engineers or AI grads to pull off these, fancy AI things?
To some extent, definitely. I think that since this is a big shift, I think it's going to affect a lot on how we recruit and what skills or capabilities or even personalities that we need in the newsroom. So maybe a few years ago, you would hire someone because he or she was very fast writing, like great for breaking news. Maybe that's not a skill that you need that much anymore. Maybe you need something again that has this really special tone of voice. Someone that's really good, have a lot of soft skills, can build trust, can build connections. That could be the same person, but it's not. It could be, but maybe not. So I think it's going to affect us. But then, of course, I think we do need more, tech savvy people from the management team and down, so to speak. Definitely.
Are we having enough tech savvy people in newsrooms, or like what's the level at the moment?
Probably a mixed, but I haven't. It's hard to say that, but as a business in general, probably not. That's not usually this. I mean, even though it has changed, but that's not usually the skills that has been considered the most important.
From your research and during the interviews you were doing to compile your book, which news outlet would you say is the global leader when it comes to using AI in the newsroom?
You have a lot of you have some in Norway. Norway is a very interesting market if you're into AI and journalism. Goes for basically the whole of Nordics, but I mean one case that's usually brought up is in Tromsø, which is a small local newsroom in northern Norway. They have been working with AI since day one. It feels like you probably have heard about them. They're doing a great job. Other Norwegian newsrooms as well. But there's some I saw a while ago. Axel Springer in Poland also had done amazing, really impressive stuff when it comes to like content discovery and CMS and kind of tying that together. But I would say in Norway if I had to choose.
For that Norwegian news outlet, which I won't even dare pronounce the name of, is there something which they did with AI which you're like, oh, I wish I had thought of that myself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they were very early with, using AI in order to kind of find stories. I mean, before, you have journalists that have built, their entire career of being able to find these documents that nobody else found, right? And even, there are many news outlets that base their whole business model on that. That will probably be a bit challenging in the future, since like basically everything that's out there is public, and it's easier at least to find now. But they were very early on that, and remember also that in the Nordics there's a lot of open data. So it's about society and companies, and so it's a lot of public records. Like basically everything is public. So they had an upper hand there, I guess. But so the stuff that they did in the beginning, we were definitely impressed by.
All right. When going through your book, I found it very, very easy to read. So well done for formatting it and laying it out in sort of a logical manner. And I think The only sentence in the whole book I disagree with would be this one, which is like sort of like towards the first half. And you wrote that AI cannot decide what is important, sensitive, or unexpected. And in my case, at least, Gemini seems to be doing a pretty good job of like flagging my important emails, and ChatGPT itself is pretty good at writing the inverted pyramids stories. So we seem to have different stances on this. Where are you coming from when you put that argument out?
I think maybe more. I was thinking about the responsibility part. Like, you are the one that's responsible. You're also the one that hopefully know your audience. AI and tech and data basically can also be a very, it's very wise to use that in order to get to know your audience, obviously. But in the end, and these unexpected things, as an editor, which I've been for a long time, sometimes you just feel like this is going to be this is a thing, this is news, or this is an angle of a news, and you can't really maybe explain it, but you just know that it is. It comes from experience, it comes from gut feeling. Although gut feeling is probably something that we have had too much of in journalism, but it's still, we need a little bit, I think, and I think that's what I was trying to argue. But I agree, although I do agree with you that when it comes to, especially getting to the point, then, AI usually is better than humans.
So taking your perspective into sort of like using your own human experience, I guess, into this, how can we design a future newsroom with AI while baking this instinct inside it? Because of course, if we want these tools to improve, we have to find what's great at making us human and helping this technology learn. So how do we bake ourselves into the AI we're designing our newsrooms to fit around?
Yeah, so and that's a discussion that I've been following now. There's a debate whether is AI something like, is the future of a newsroom, is that a human kind of guiding technology, or is it the technology that assists humans? And again, I think different newsrooms are probably going to choose differently here. But I mean, I do think that's, and maybe it's not, if you have a bigger newsroom, you're going to have one area where machines are doing almost everything, and that maybe, when you want to cater to the update me user need, then AI is usually pretty good at that. But then again, when it comes to giving perspective, to connecting with audience, to which I do think that there's a big demand for still, and always will, then maybe you'll have some AI in the background, so to speak. But as I said before, I think this development, we need to kind of refocus a little bit on how we recruit, and what types of skills and capabilities we have in the newsroom. But it's going to be, it's hard to just say one or a few, but I know it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. What's your promise to your audience? Is it to be super fast and smart? Is it to be have a lot of trust? Hopefully both, but so I would say it depends. It's a big question.
Do you think AI will be creating new sort of types of journalists? So, for instance, you have the idea of a watchdog journalist, you have the idea of an educative journalist, and similar to you, you're like outlets focusing on breaking news, Reuters style headline. Some outlets maybe more creating like a scrollable story. Will AI be creating new types of journalists and newsrooms?
Yeah, definitely, and formats, and the way how we can reach out. And I think that is, if I understood your question correctly, and I think that's even from the start, that's been the most exciting part with AI. Like, how can it help us to have these like better user experience, and serve our audiences in a much better way. Before it was, if I interviewed you, then I would decide, like, the only way to to access this information is to read 1,311 word story in an article, and obviously AI can now that's not a limit anymore. You can do it, you can present it in any way you want, basically, and the audience can probably very soon also choose in which way they want to consume it. So that's probably a good thing. So yes, and I think that's what you're describing is already happening in a very fast pace.
For someone who says there's not so keen on shiny new AI tools, in your book you also wrote about some of the AI tools you built yourself. One of them you called the Crisis Manager. Which of your current self-built tools using AI is your favorite or go-to?
I mean, I still use that. Now
Right.
I don't deal with that many crises because it was I was more busy doing that when I was in a newsroom of 300, Scandinavia's biggest newsroom, and there was constant, not a crisis, but we got a lot of attention basically. But I think that's one of my favorite tools that I can still use, and in preparing me for interviews and anything. And I think it's also a good example because it highlights a little bit of what the points I'm trying to make. Is like, because one of the real strengths of I think at least of dealing with a crisis is that you're a human, and you are human basically. You have empathy, you have all that stuff, and so the crisis manager could not operate by itself, but when you combine it with me in this case, hopefully it becomes a little bit better.
All right, I'll leave it to our listeners to read more about the Crisis Manager in the book, and move on to asking you some of the times, like this case, it helped you, but sometimes AI doesn't really move things forward. So, from your expertise, what's the most common point of failure you see newsrooms hitting when they are using AI?
I think that we as a business has been very focused on finding efficiency, and I and so this was something that we heard from the start. Like, this AI equals efficiency gains basically. So a lot of newsrooms, they would think, okay, where do most of our staff work? They work in the newsroom because it's and that's usually where, we have 85% or whatever of our staff is in the newsroom. So let's start there, and then you try to find efficiency in the newsroom, in all the processes that we have. And maybe it would have been wiser to think about, okay, so how can we use this to create value for us as an organization? Maybe it is in the newsroom, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's in in marketing, it's in business, advertising, in those areas. So that's, I think, is one thing that's a lot of us missed, and same when you go to the newsroom. For us, at least, we also try to find efficiency. We succeeded in some ways, transcription, all that stuff, but in others we didn't. So I was more excited when we started to turn to the consumer-facing products with chatbots and text-to-speech, and this who that could actually using the technology in order to create value and add value for our audience. So that was exciting and fun.
Perfect segue for my next two questions. In one of the pages of AI in the newsroom, you urge us to be more daring. What exactly is your challenge for journalists and editors? What do you want to see us be doing with AI?
Yeah, so this is always a little bit tricky to talk about because, but I think that as a business, we could allow ourselves to be a little bit more brave. We think that trust is everything, and in one way it is. But that doesn't mean that if you ever you make one small mistake, then everything is then you have to start from scratch again. That's not how it works. It depends, of course, on how you tackle when you do the error. But I think that there are room for a little bit more experiment, maybe even a little bit more errors. Just if you're transparent, you apologize, or you say how you're gonna fix this, because I think that is actually a huge stopper for many newsrooms, that they are so scared committing a mistake, making a mistake, because it's so deeply connected to trust. And again, I'm not arguing, that we should just don't look at, the trust issue, because it is very important for us. But but we make mistake, and people usually they understand. So yes, I think that's a reason why, maybe that's one of the reasons, at least, of why other businesses, types of businesses, might have come further with innovation and experimenting.
And when we do make mistakes, there's always the crisis manager. So hey, maybe that eases our minds a bit. All right, and you also mentioned, as we start to conclude, one of the successes, which was the chatbot. You mentioned in the book Election Buddy, which you created in your previous role, a chatbot for helping readers understand the EU, and then was so successful you even did the US elections with it. Did the questions people ask the chatbot reveal gaps in the journalism itself? So maybe the topic, the format, or angles that journalists hadn't covered properly?
Yes, and that was one of the best things about it, because in the beginning, we really used it as a funnel to the newsroom, and say, a lot of people are asking about this, and so we should address that. And even it's in some cases when we launched our general chatbot, we could see some people would start typing like, what's going on in this specific, I don't know, town or village, or it became in. So you could say, something's going on there. You told a reporter, they would make a phone call and get the news out. So they broke a story, basically. So yes, you could definitely say that, and I think that's chatbots are becoming a bit antique by now, but just that service to the audience is, they could ask whatever they want, they'll get an answer of, it's verified journalism, no hallucinations. That is such a nice service to the audience, instead of them having to wait until you make a podcast about the stuff that you wonder about, or if you wrote it in an article 2 days ago that has disappeared from the front page. So yes, I think it's a very exciting way of consuming and presenting news and journalism.
I guess it's always about giving the people what they want. All right, as promised, the final 2 questions for our lovely chat today. And I'll read them out to sort of not try to disguise who wrote who, and I'll try to read them in a boring way as possible. So the first question is that AI is often framed as a way to make journalism more efficient, but in struggling newsrooms, efficiency can also mean fewer reporters, more output, and weaker editorial oversight. Where is the line between responsible AI adoption and using AI to hollow out journalism while calling it innovation?
Well, you're right about that, and I think and even if you're a reporter, maybe you don't walk around your whole day wondering how you can become more efficient. That's not like an end goal necessarily for your. It could, but I think that if we stick to the principle that we have been working with for a very long time now, it's like that we are responsible for everything we publish, no matter where it comes from, what technology assisted us, then we will probably be fine. So you can never outsource that responsibility. And so I know that was, it's a kind of broad answer, but I think that if you can apply it, I think the risk is smaller. But yes, but you're right. I mean, if you would fire 10 of your reporters and replace it with a chatbot, that would definitely increase the risk of errors and decreasing trust. But then you would probably also have given up on that principle of taking responsibility for everything you publish.
I think that makes sense. And lastly, if you were applying for your first journalism job ever in 2026, which skills would you dedicate most time to improving to be as AI-proof as possible?
Good question. And I think, again, it comes back to what you train. I would probably choose one of these extremes. Like either I would try to become, a ninja when it comes to collaborating with machines, learn everything about, vibe coding and building my own tools and using AI in as many ways as possible. Or I would try to develop my writing skill, my interviewing technique, my how I look and act in front of the camera, maybe. So to really to kind of to enhance these skills and capabilities that humans have. So I would choose one of those two ways, and not try to become, not necessarily just try to, you end up somewhere in the middle.
It's a case in point, because you didn't send Crisis Manager to speak to us today. You came here in person, video ready, so we thank you for that. Martin, before we say goodbye to our listeners, what is your one pitch for the people in the journalism world to read your book, AI in the Newsroom?
Well, I thought that, that it might be a bit too late, but then to write a book that is, it's quite basic. So if you already are building your own agents, maybe, maybe you enjoy it anyway, I don't know, but maybe it wouldn't be as useful. But then just recently, one of a very progressive newsroom here in Sweden, they bought it to their entire staff. So then I felt like, okay, maybe there is a demand for that book anyway. So that made me happy.
That's pretty good. Pity I don't work at that newsroom. But Martin, thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts and also insights about your book AI in the Newsroom, available to purchase online in bookstores in Swedish and in English. And to you, our listeners, that's all for today, and thank you for listening to Fix Ed. If you want more conversations like this, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.